Eric, thank you for joining me today for the last conversation about our books for 2023. And I put a lot of them out there as an idea that we might center some things on. And I appreciate your commitment to kind of reading and tying in some things. And I know some others are reading as well. They're not necessarily just joining us for this conversation, but I appreciate you being here. And we're just going to have fun today. We're just going to talk about some of the books that have meant a lot to us, that hold possibility for other coaches like you and me, and maybe some quick insights that we have gained from them, and maybe a couple of other books that are not necessarily on our quote list that we might have seen or have read some that might give benefit to us. So thank you again for being here and being a part of the conversation.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it.
So how many books did you get read altogether so far?
13 or 14 so far. Yeah.
Man, you've done really, really well.
Well, you gave us a challenge to get 15, so.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you took up the challenge. So we intentionally, I did not choose a particular book to talk about today, so we could maybe talk about some that impacted us or that we think might be beneficial to some others. So I'll start with you. Any particular books that you've read 13 or something in that neighborhood?
One of the ones that I really enjoyed, and I don't know what I would do with it in terms of coaching, but in terms of leadership, very useful, was High Conflict.
Yeah.
And I don't even remember who wrote that, what the lady's name was. She's
Amanda
a journalist.
Ripley.
That's her.
Yeah. Wasn't she a reporter, if I remember right?
She's a reporter, yeah. And it was thinking about where our society is today and even where our churches are today, and our denomination today. There's so much division. And when she talks about high conflict, she's talking about conflict that really has become so entrenched, that there's no room for movement much.
If I remember that book too with you, Eric, she was using 2 or 3 stories of people who had been through some conflictual situations, like in a city council thing. I think it's something out near San Francisco. And
yep, there was a guy out there who actually is an expert in dealing with conflict. And it's kind of Dr. Heal Thyself sort of thing, because he saw some needs in his neighborhood and became a part of the city council or planning committee or something, and was trying to make a difference. And instead, he alienated everybody and just made things a much bigger mess. And she used that to give as a case study, to give some illustrations of, okay, here's where he went wrong, and then here's how he fixed it. Because he recognized what was happening. He recognized that he was getting so anxious about it and involved in it that he needed to put some of his techniques to good use for himself. And as he did that, he instead of running away from the conflict, he leaned into it and began to connect with the people involved. And ultimately, they were able to settle things out.
Yeah.
And one of Ripley's main points is the importance of connecting with people as people.
Yeah.
Because to see them, instead of seeing that other as being, whether you're red or blue, seeing that person who votes the opposite way as being the enemy, as being simply wrong and evil and whatever, getting to know them and their struggles and their thinking breaks down some of the barriers. And you may not change your opinions, but it breaks down the conflict.
I think
Go ahead.
I think the thing that caught my attention about it as far as dealing with coaches or coaching from a coaching standpoint is I have been dealing with some people sometimes as a thinking partner where they are troubled with their relationship with somebody else. And I guess what caught my attention in that book was some of those principles that she talked about the ways to make connections might be a way that I could ask questions of someone who's in the middle of it to begin to look at relationships differently. That was
help.
what I
Yeah, I
caught.
think that would be helpful in coaching. One of the things, she ends the book with a lengthy story, a chapter on an event that took place. I don't remember exactly when it was, but and I don't remember exactly how they got together, but somehow a group of liberal New York conservative Jews connected with a group of prison wardens, very, very conservative Trump voters
Yeah.
out in Ohio. And it was fascinating hearing the stories of the two groups, how afraid they were of each other. And they actually did 3-day field trips where this group of 13 or 14 from New York went to Ohio, toured the prison facilities, talked to them, saw their gun collections, etc. And then the group from Ohio went to New York, went to synagogue with them on Friday evening, and just the fascinating
Yeah.
relationships that came out of that.
I think we need to get everybody in the House of Representatives to read that book right now and learn how to deal with things, But I'm
Well,
sorry, I shouldn't have
well,
gotten into a political.
definitely,
But I
definitely
think,
them and the Senate, and
yeah,
but
yeah.
even in our
Oh,
churches,
our churches are notorious. Yeah.
we've we've forgotten how to do conflict in a healthy way.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's no longer okay for us to differ in thinking, because if you're thinking differently from me, you're obviously wrong,
Yeah.
and why should I have anything to do with you?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's just such a huge loss.
It is. You're right. It is. So,
I've thought that one of the worst things that came out of the SBC schism back, in the 80s primarily, is the left needed the right. Well, there was no left, but
yeah. Yeah.
the further left
The perceived
needed
left.
the perceived left needed the right, and vice versa.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the fundamentalists took over and lost in a huge way
Yeah. Yeah.
by losing those of us who were not there. But in the same way, I think we, as typical Virginia Baptists, lost a lot in losing them.
No doubt. I mean, and you see in a place like Virginia how we really at least had the potential of really helping each other relationship wise and church wise, even in terms of the way we do church, just by maybe not agreeing with each other all the time, but at least hearing about what was going on with each other. So
Yeah, Sandy Creek could use some Charleston, and
that's right.
Charleston could
That's
use
right.
some Sandy Creek.
Yeah. Yeah. Those old historical kind of elements of Baptist life have not gone away, but they've just kind of separated from that aspect of working together.
And we
So,
don't gain the strengths from one another.
yeah, that's right. That's right. Well,
So
there's
that's
others.
my book.
Yeah. I mean, there's others. There were several in here that there's one that I read that I would call attention to is one that was called Conversations Worth Having. And it's a book by a couple of ladies. And it kind of is dealing a lot, Eric, with I guess I would call it the appreciative inquiry approach to conversations. Appreciative inquiry is that process that's come out from David Copperidge, or out of Case Western University up in Ohio, of really taking into consideration not only the things we agree on, but the things of where that we connect with well in our heritage and our history to kind of lead us forward into the future. And they do a lot of things about conversations, relationships, talking about how even I've seen it used some in working with churches and others in trying to not just deal and live in the past, but live in the future based on the positive things that have taken place in the past. And so I found that one to be a help because they had some very practical resources in there that were helpful. Another one that I really enjoyed was Flourish by Martin Seligman, who is not I don't think is a Christian believer by any means.
I'm pretty sure he's Jewish. I think he talks about that.
Yeah. And but what I always have enjoyed about him is his emphasis on the positive psychology world. He's kind of the one who basically started that emphasis. And the interesting thing to read in Flourish is how he even talked about how he's changed his mind about what's the most important thing. It's no longer finding authentic happiness. He uses the language instead of authentic happiness is finding well-being. And he even says, I was wrong. You don't hear many people say that in the context of a resource, but he uses the elements of his, what he calls PERMA, PERMA. That's kind of the acrostic for the things he says that people need to acknowledge to flourish in life and to find the well-being that they mean. I'm trying to remember all the different pieces of it. But
yeah, I don't remember those either.
P, I think, if I remember right, stands for positive emotions. I know R is dealing with relationships and well-connected relationships. M is finding meaning and purpose in the things that we're involved in. The E and the A, I've got to go back and revisit, but I continue to recall those, and just it was a psychologically based or sociologically based research kind of focus on what he is learning through the research they're doing out of the University of Pennsylvania. But even his recognition of helping people to focus on their well-being, that is the significant things that we do as coaches. And so I've just enjoyed the resource there and some of the encouragement.
And he had some very, very practical things that would directly apply in terms of coaching. One of them was he would assign homework of every night writing down, here are 3 things that went well today.
Yeah.
And this is why these things went well.
One of the first things I remember him doing is talking about that you ought to do that every night. Think of 3 things that you're grateful for that happened during the day. The second thing is writing a gratitude letter to somebody in your life who, who represents some aspect of your journey. Just the positive emotions, the chemicals that are released in the body by just doing those kinds of things can create some of that flow, some of that element of finding some well-being in what you're doing. And that's the part I think I appreciate about most, because even though it's not a Christian focused idea, that idea is clear in Scripture about learning, knowing how to be grateful and sharing our gratitude. And those pieces are, I just wish, things that we would do more of in the context of church life. But I think as we have a chance to coach people, helping as they are working through some of these things to think of the kinds of actions that they could take to help them on their journey could be a helpful piece. So.
Yeah, good things for us to do and good things to share with clients.
Yeah.
Yep.
What else? Any others that come to your mind?
Well, I was hoping we wouldn't be the only 2, so that was the only one I prepared.
Well, that's fine. Listen, the other one that was mentioned to me, our good friend Christy Foldenauer mentioned to me a book that she had read that's not on our list, which as I said, it doesn't matter whether it's on the list or not. Those were just guides for us anyway. But she had just recently finished reading a book by Heidi Grant Halverson. And I've got to get the name of the book right, because it's got too many words for me to remember easily. And as I went back and looked, I had it in my Kindle already, so which I thought was interesting, but I haven't finished reading it. It's called No One Understands You and What to Do About It. Christy was felt very, very good about that particular resource. It's in the Harvard Business Review series, or it's one that their press publishes. And I want to think that Heidi is either a professor or does something in relationship to Harvard University. But Christy shared that was just a very good book that she really thought had some great possibilities for coaches also. So
it's No One Understands You.
No One Understands You and What to Do About It. And her name again is Heidi Grant Halverson, Halvorson. I thought it was Halverson, but it's Halvorson, Vorson.
Huh.
Another one that I ran into
on Kindle.
Yeah, another one I ran to recently. I didn't find it at first either. Keep looking. Because when I put in Heidi Halverson, it did not, nothing came up. But she's got 3 books from the Harvard Press that are on there. There's another one called 9 Things.
Okay, I did find it. 9 Things Successful People Do Differently.
Right, that's one of them. And then the other one I was talking about is No One Understands You and What to Do About It. That's the second one. She's got another one called Motivational Challenges.
Well, actually, I've come up with several because, there are several in here.
These are 3 that I have in my library.
So okay.
He probably does have more.
Looks like she's got 5 that I found.
Yeah. But there's another one that I've ran into recently. I've not finished reading it, but I saw him do a video on it, and it depends on what you can do with Michael Bungay Stanier. Michael Bungay Stanier is the one who wrote the book, The Coaching Habit, and he's written a couple of others. He's got a new one called How to Work with Almost Anyone. I don't know if you can see that with things. And he's talking a lot about, it's subtitled 5 Questions for Building the Best Possible Relationships. And he especially is talking about, he has a thing in here he calls a keystone conversation, which is just kind of an initial conversation, especially with somebody you work with, somebody you're supervising, even sometimes just personal relationships, talking up front about the things that are important in the relationship can be very important. And his whole thing is about how to have these kinds of conversations. There's different things. He talks about identifying your BPR, your best possible relationship person. And believe it or not, the one he talks about is maybe even somebody that you don't get along with well, to learn how to have and make the best possible relationship with that person in a connection. So it's interesting. He if you remember him, Eric, from some of those other books we looked at, he writes very simply.
I like that.
Yeah, but he's saying some good things in the context of it. So, and there's more good books coming out, but those are just ones that we would call attention to and show some deference with. I have shared with you, and I think what I will do for next year is simplify our book club a little bit and probably just do 4 books next year instead of putting out a list of 20-something books and say, here, read a whole bunch of them. And maybe we can get some more concentration with them. But I think, you know, some of the others that are on there, I mean, there is some good resources on that list. Change
Yeah.
Your Questions, Change Your Life by Marilee Adams is a very good book about asking questions.
Hmm.
Oh gosh, Jesus the Great Philosopher.
I
Jonathan,
did not read that one.
and I've not gotten to it yet, but it is a very good book about kind of like the idea of positive psychology but looking at it from an aspect of Jesus. If I remember Jonathan Pennington right, the author, he did his work at Liberty, of all places.
Hmm.
And I think he's the one. I don't think I'm confusing him with somebody else, but that's supposedly one that is really good. And then, gosh, I could keep going down here because I like so many of them. But I'm looking forward to reading. I have not read it yet. I'm looking forward to reading the book A New Way to Think by Roger Martin. Roger Martin is another one of those real smart individuals in the world of business. But I have heard very positive things about that resource as well. And since we're thinking partners as coaches with people, I thought, hey, this might be a way to kind of come up with some more ways to think about things. So, well, Eric, thank you for your willingness to kind of just come on board and talk about these books with me. I know the one or two people who have watched these videos that we have made have appreciated, especially some of the comments and things that you have made. So thank you for doing that. And I'll look forward to seeing what we can do with this in the future.
Yeah, I've enjoyed this. It's good to have some direction.
Yeah.
Rather than just sort of reaching out and grabbing whatever.
Yeah.
You give us some direction with the list, and I found that helpful.
Yeah. Well, good. Well, thank you, and keep learning. You know, one of the best things about being a coach is we have to keep learning ourselves. It's kind of hard to encourage others to grow and change if we're not willing to do that ourselves. So thank you for your commitment to doing that. And hopefully we'll just have that opportunity as the Lord provides in the future as well. So blessings.